Everything changed in a matter of seconds. I mean, literally, one moment you're on top of the world, and the next, a supercomputer is telling you that everything you just accomplished was completely meaningless. Welcome back to NFL Nexus, everyone. I'm your host, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we are tearing apart what has to be one of the most baffling, contradictory, and honestly intense narratives in modern football. But before we really start digging into this, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and definitely comment below with your thoughts as we go through this, because I really want to know where you stand. And hey, if you really want to support our deep dives, consider becoming a channel member. We appreciate you. All right, let's get into it. The 2026 Chicago Bears are living in two completely different realities right now. It's like a split-screen movie. On one side, you have a city and a locker room vibrating with this undeniable, ferocious momentum. Just imagine the absolute state of Chicago right now, right? The freezing wind coming off Lake Michigan, met by an absolute fever pitch of fan obsession. We are talking about a historic franchise that has awakened from a deep, painful slumber, a fan base that can literally taste a championship. You can feel this surge of energy that practically rattles the concrete of Soldier Field every Sunday. But then, on the other side of things, you have cold, unfeeling machines predicting their absolute downfall. The underdog paradox. We are looking at a team that just broke a grueling 4-year playoff drought, a team that genuinely feels like it's on the absolute precipice of a dynasty. And yet, the underlying advanced metrics are screaming from the rooftops that it was all just a mirage. Today, we are going to explore this massive tension. We're going to break down the film, we're going to pull apart the stats, and we're going to look at the psychological warfare happening right now in the NFC North. What is really, truly fascinating here is the sheer swagger oozing from this interaction. Just picture the scene. This is from a recent sit-down on the New Heights Explainer. You have Travis Kelce, a guy who is unequivocally a future first-ballot Hall of Famer, arguably the greatest tight end to ever lace up a pair of cleats, looking directly at the Bears' tight end room and totally validating them. Kelce is sitting there calling Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland two absolute dogs. Now think about the weight of that statement for a second. When a multi-time Super Bowl champion anoints your weapons, the entire league stops and listens. It is the ultimate seal of approval. But then, Caleb Williams doesn't just sit there and take the compliment gracefully. He completely doubles down. He catches Kelce entirely off guard in the middle of the conversation. He leans in and says, "I got a third one now. You haven't seen him? He's a freak of nature." He's talking about Sam Roche, their number 69 overall pick out of Stanford. The confidence here is just staggering to witness. Williams is openly, happily bragging to an absolute legend about a terrifying new offensive weapon, building this immediate, palpable sense of dominance. The Bears' offense, which, by the way, already averaged almost 26 points and nearly 370 yards a game last year, sounds like it's literally evolving into an unstoppable monster behind closed doors. The hype is deafening. The swagger is off the charts. The rest of the league is officially put on notice. And then, the math speaks. 16. Boom. Shatter the hype instantly. Forget the podcast interviews, forget the swagger, the chest bumping, and the locker room speeches. ESPN just released their first Football Power Index projections for the 2026 NFL season. And guys, let's really take a second to understand what this FPI actually is, so we know what we're dealing with. We are talking about massive supercomputers humming away in Bristol, Connecticut, stripping out literally all human emotion from the game. There is no eye test here, there are no gut feelings, no momentum. They simulate the upcoming season 10,000 times using complex betting markets, schedule data, and incredibly advanced predictive analytics. And after all those thousands upon thousands of simulations, where did the almighty algorithm place this supposedly terrifying, rapidly ascending Bears roster? 16th, dead center of the National Football League. Perfectly, painfully, agonizingly average, hovering right on the razor's edge, sitting just outside the playoff picture looking in. Think about the sheer whiplash of this. You go from Caleb Williams warning Travis Kelce about a monstrous new offensive juggernaut to a supercomputer coldly telling you that you are the 16th best team in football. It is a stunning, sobering forecast that instantly just dumps a giant bucket of ice water on Chicago's fiery offseason. So naturally, the crucial question we are faced with today is, how is this even mathematically possible? How does a team totally conquer their division, get their franchise quarterback plastered on the cover of Madden, and then get told by the brightest analytical minds in the sport that they are just average? This right here, this is the central mystery of our explainer today. We are looking at a massive, jarring cognitive dissonance. Seriously, imagine the psychology of a Chicago fan right now. You just threw a parade in your living room, you just bought the brand new jersey, you are riding the absolute highest high a football fan can ride, and you wake up to a literal spreadsheet telling you your team is irrelevant. It's the human eye versus the algorithm. It's the raw emotion, the violence, the sheer will of the game versus the cold, sterile, unfeeling calculus of a database. Every single fan, every TV analyst, every player inside that locker room is feeling this exact tension right now. Are the Bears actually a sleeping giant about to totally take over the league for the next decade, or are they just a fragile house of cards waiting for the wind to blow them over? Let's trace back how we actually got here. Because look, you absolutely cannot ignore the concrete evidence of what this team achieved on the grass. You just can't. Look at this resume from the 2025 campaign under first-year head coach Ben Johnson. An 11-6 record, the NFC North title outright. They definitively, emphatically ended a grueling 4-year playoff drought. 4 long years of pain, of rebuilding, of suffering through miserable winters, watching other teams play in January, all wiped away. But you know what? It wasn't just the wins. It was how they won. It was their identity. They beat the Green Bay Packers in an instant classic in the wildcard round. Let's be real, that wasn't just a football game. That was an emotional catharsis that will be etched into Chicago sports lore for the rest of time. Then, they turn around and take the mighty Los Angeles Rams to the absolute brink, dragging them into a bloody, exhausting overtime in the divisional round, before finally coming up short. And orchestrating all of this magic? Caleb Williams. He set a franchise record with 3,942 passing yards and 31 touchdowns, creatively and masterfully utilizing weapons like DeAndre Swift, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore. This wasn't a team backing into the playoffs because the rest of the conference was weak. No way. This was a team that kicked the front door off its hinges and announced their arrival to the world.
And the world definitely noticed. The league crowned a new hero. Caleb Williams officially became the very first Chicago Bear ever to grace the cover of Madden NFL, boasting a massive 90 overall rating. It's a huge milestone. It represents true, undeniable cultural dominance. His teammates were absolutely ecstatic for him. You had cornerback Tyreek Stevenson demanding Williams sign his personal copy. Guard Jonah Jackson called it an absolute no-brainer after the unbelievable, logic-defying backyard football plays Williams made to win them games last year. But here is where the narrative gets incredibly intense and where we start to see the friction. Head coach Ben Johnson, according to the insider reports, he was completely, utterly unimpressed by the whole thing. Why? Because Ben Johnson possesses this almost Belichickian stoicism. He doesn't care about video games. He actively ignores the cultural dominance. He knows what's coming. He knows that in the violent, hyper-competitive, unforgiving ecosystem of the NFL, if you aren't getting better every single day, you are actively dying. Johnson is setting a very clear tone for the entire building. Video game covers do not win Super Bowls. Execution wins Super Bowls.
And that brings us straight into the laboratory. How exactly is Ben Johnson evolving this offense to silence the doubters, beat the algorithm, and stay ahead of the curve? Well, let's talk about the 13 personnel alignment. This specific grouping illustrates the exact nightmare scenario that opposing defensive coordinators are waking up to in cold sweats heading into 2026. For those who might not know the terminology, 13 personnel means 1 running back and 3 tight ends on the field at the same time. Step 1 of this monster, Colston Loveland, who led the entire team with 713 receiving yards last year, stretching the seam and running like a giant wide receiver. Step 2, Cole Kmet, the proven, bruising veteran who can anchor an edge and block like a tackle. And step 3, the brand new X Factor we talked about earlier, rookie Sam Roush out of Stanford. Let's get incredibly granular about this tactical dilemma for a second because it's brilliant. We are talking about the literal physics of having 3 massive 250-plus pound tight ends on the field simultaneously. Roush is the 22-year-old absolute freak. He can run block like an elite left tackle, pass block against speeding edge rushers, and yet he runs routes like a shifty slot receiver. When you deploy all 3 of these massive, incredibly athletic bodies at once, you create an impossible geometry for the defense. It's a catch-22. If the defense stays in their heavy base package with slow linebackers to stop the run, the Bears just spread them out, dictate the passing matchups, and throw right over their heads. But if the defense goes light and brings in extra defensive backs to cover the pass, the Bears just collapse the line of scrimmage and physically crush them in the run game. It is an offensive, tactical masterclass in the making.
But the antagonist returns. The math simply does not care about your 13 personnel, or your tactical geometry, or your shiny new draft picks. The sterile data table tells a chilling story. Look at this. Detroit Lions at number 8. Green Bay Packers sitting pretty at number 6. And the Chicago Bears all the way down at 16. Think about the sheer audacity, the deep, visceral humiliation of this model. Let's recap history real quick. The Chicago Bears beat the Green Bay Packers twice last year. Let me repeat that because it's important. They beat their most bitter, ancient rival in the regular season, and then they physically, forcefully eliminated them from the playoffs in the wild card round. The Packers, frankly, did not significantly improve their roster this offseason. They stood pat. Yet, the computer ranks Green Bay an inexplicable 10 spots higher than the reigning division champions who literally just sent them packing. It is a statistical slap in the face. It's the algorithm looking at the blood, the sweat, and the literal tears Chicago poured into that rivalry, looking at everything they built, and coldly stating,
Yeah, we just don't buy it. And honestly, it gets even worse when you look at the company the algorithm forces them to keep. This chart visually illustrates exactly how fragile the FPI thinks the Bears' success actually is. It gives them a 46.5% chance to make the playoffs. That puts them sub 50%, more likely to miss the playoffs than make them. And they are mathematically grouped in a tightly clustered tier with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 47.3% and the Dallas Cowboys at 48.1%. Let's be very clear about why this is such a massive insult to Chicago's current momentum. The Buccaneers and Cowboys are viewed right now around the league as stagnant, plateaued franchises. They are the very definition of sheer mediocrity. They are stuck in the mud, fighting for their lives just to sneak into a bottom seed wildcard spot. The model doesn't view the ascending Bears as predators hunting for a Super Bowl. It views them as prey. It completely dismisses the sheer dominance they showed down the stretch in 2025, stripping away their hard-earned identity and carelessly tossing them into the middle of the pack scrap heap. But this right here is the ultimate disrespect. 19.4%. That is the probability the ESPN FPI algorithm gives the Chicago Bears to repeat as NFC North champions. Less than 1 in 5. I really want to let that sink in for a second. Less than 1 in 5. You have a 90 overall Madden cover superstar quarterback who is taking the league by storm. You have a verified genius head coach calling the plays. You have a terrifying, physically imposing new offensive scheme that defenses don't have tape on yet. And the computer says you have less than a 20% chance to defend your own crown in your own division. The machine is essentially calling the entire 2025 season a complete fluke. It's looking at the division banner currently hanging in Soldier Field, waving in the wind, and calling it a mathematical anomaly, a glitch. So you have to ask yourself, why? Why is the math so aggressively, stubbornly, almost angrily betting against Chicago? To understand the machine, we have to look under the hood and dive deep into the advanced metrics. Let's read this quote from ESPN's analytics expert Seth Walder because this explains everything. He says, the numbers suggest the Bears overachieved in 2025. They ranked 7th and 19th in offensive and defensive EPA per play, respectively. But that defensive number was entirely reliant on turnovers. Chicago's defense ranks 30th on non-turnover plays. Okay, let's stop right there and break this down, because we need to clearly define EPA. EPA stands for expected points added. It's a metric that measures the actual tangible value of a play in terms of points on the scoreboard. It calculates exactly how much a specific play increases a team's chances of scoring next. And when you strip away the turnovers, the flashy interceptions, the fumble recoveries, the Bears' defense was 30th in the NFL at actually preventing points. There it is, the smoking gun. This is exactly why the analytics are predicting a massive, unavoidable regression. The computer isn't blindly hating on Caleb Williams. It's absolutely terrified of what happens when the Chicago defense doesn't get a lucky bounce. And this stark visual perfectly illustrates the horrifying reality of those defensive metrics. In 2025, the Bears were number 1 in the NFL in takeaways. They led the entire league in stealing the ball away from the other team. But look at the other bars on this chart. They were near the absolute bottom of the league in yards allowed, points allowed, and total sacks. Let's talk about the actual physical mechanics of a turnover for a second. Think about what a fumble actually is. It is literally an oddly shaped, oblong leather ball bouncing completely unpredictably on artificial turf. An interception is often just a tipped pass fluttering wildly in the wind. You cannot build a long-term, multi-year sustainable dynasty relying solely on fumbles and interceptions. It's impossible. Takeaways are inherently volatile. They involve an immense amount of pure luck. The FPI model sees a defense that bled yardage down after down, that couldn't pressure the opposing quarterback consistently, and survived purely on opportunistic, unpredictable chaos. The math says that chaos is totally unsustainable. When those lucky bounces dry up, the defense collapses entirely. But here is what the computer fundamentally doesn't understand. The humans in the building knew the math too. Let's take you inside Hallis Hall for a second. Imagine the front office war room. General Manager Ryan Poles and his staff, working late nights, drinking endless cups of coffee, glaring at the exact same terrifying red metrics on their screens that Seth Walder looked out. They knew it was unsustainable. They didn't just sit around polishing their new division trophy, getting complacent, thinking they had it all figured out. They didn't bury their heads in the sand and just blindly pray for more lucky bounces next year. No, they chose to attack rather than retreat. They went into the 2026 offseason with one singular, violent mission: fix the defensive foundation. Erase the reliance on chaos, take the luck out of the equation entirely so the algorithm has nothing left to complain about. Let's meticulously trace the timeline of this absolute defensive overhaul, because it was a masterclass in roster building. Day one of free agency. Bam, they immediately strike a massive $40 million agreement with former Seahawks safety Kobe Bryant. This isn't just a depth signing, it is instant, brutal enforcement. Bryant brings a punishing physical presence to the secondary that they desperately needed. Day two. Bam, they add veteran linebacker Devin Bush to solidify their run defense and plug up those gaping holes in the middle of the field that teams exploited last year. And then we get to draft day. The Bears pull off what many analysts across the league are calling the absolute biggest heist of the first round, selecting Oregon safety Dylan Thieneman. They didn't just add warm bodies this offseason, they specifically, intentionally drafted elite, sure-tackling, high IQ football players. Thieneman's elite open field tackling specifically neutralizes the down-to-down yardage bleeding that the FPI is so worried about. The front office engineered a fundamental defense that will earn its stops organically on third down. They won't actually need a lucky turnover to get off the field anymore. Which brings us to a really fascinating statistical concept that almost everyone, including a lot of experts, completely misinterprets. Let's establish some absolute analytical authority here. Let's talk about the word regression. We usually use it as a dirty word in sports, right? Fans hear it and instantly panic, assuming it means a team will inevitably fall apart and get worse. But statistically speaking, regression to the mean is a two-way street. It applies to both extremes. Yes, the analytics are perfectly right on one front. The Bears' astronomical, wildly lucky turnover numbers will likely negatively regress. They will undoubtedly fall back down toward the league average. But what the spreadsheet analysts are completely missing is that Chicago's historically bad yardage and sack metrics have immense room to positively regress. With guys like Kobe Bryant, Devin Bush, and Dylan Thieneman flying around the field hitting people, this defense has just as much room to get vastly, measurably better on a down-to-down fundamental basis as they do to lose a few random interceptions. The math is only looking at half the equation. It sees the luck fading, but it completely ignores the talent surging. And let's not forget the ultimate, glaring weakness of the FPI model itself, its own historical hubris. Let's pull the receipts from literally just last year. The 2025 preseason FPI prediction confidently, arrogantly declared the Philadelphia Eagles as the #1 team in all of football and the Kansas City Chiefs as #2. They were projected to be the untouchable juggernauts of the season. And what was the actual 2025 reality on the football field? The Eagles completely imploded, suffered a historic collapse, and lost humiliatingly in the wildcard round. The Chiefs, the mighty Kansas City Chiefs, they didn't even make the playoffs. The Detroit Lions and Washington Commanders were also top 6 in this exact same model last year, and both of those teams watched the postseason from their couches. The algorithm is blind to human resilience. It is blind to injuries, chemistry, and momentum. The data, the simulations, the massive multi-million-dollar server farms, they are entirely capable of being spectacularly, embarrassingly wrong. So why on earth should Chicago bow down to a 16th overall ranking from a machine that completely misread the landscape of the entire league just 12 months ago? Because here is the human element. This is the boots-on-the-ground reality that a computer simply cannot quantify no matter how many simulations it runs. Look at what is actually happening in Chicago right now as we speak. This is year 2 of the Ben Johnson offensive system. Let's understand the critical difference between year 1 and year 2 for an offense. Year 1 is strictly foundational. You are just installing the basics, figuring out what works. And that basic installation alone resulted in a division title. Year 2? Year 2 is when the training wheels completely come off. The playbook goes from a slim pamphlet to a massive encyclopedia. You pair that limitless, explosive playbook with a completely strengthened, fundamentally sound defense that no longer has to rely on chaotic gimmicks to get a stop. And most terrifying of all, the early whispers coming out of OTAs. The reports leaking out are saying Caleb Williams is already showing undeniable signs of a massive year 3 leap. The game has dramatically slowed down for him. He is reading defenses before the snap. If a guy who just threw for nearly 4,000 yards and made the cover of Madden takes another monumental step towards superstardom, you aren't just looking at a cute playoff contender. You are looking at a perennial, unstoppable powerhouse for as long as he wears the navy and orange. So we are left standing at the ultimate crossroads. Is the math exposing a 2025 fluke? A team artificially propped up by lucky bounces, an easy schedule, and unsustainable chaos? Or is the computer totally, hopelessly blind to the birth of the next great NFL dynasty? The advanced metrics loudly say they are 16th, dead average, but the players, the coaches, the film, they say they have absolute dogs on both sides of the ball. The whistle finally blows this September, and only one of these realities can survive the winter. So I have to ask you, are you trusting the FPI or the eye test? Let me know exactly what you think in the comments below. Remember to subscribe to NFL Nexus, smash that like button, and join as a channel member to support our deep dives. Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Until next time, keep your eyes on the gridiron.